The Maytee Nation as a people evolved out of the initial relations of Indian women and European men on the lands of west-central North America. While the initial offspring of these relations were individuals who possessed mixed Indian and European ancestry, the gradual establishment of distinct Maytee communities outside of Indian and European traditions, cultures, and settlements, as well as the subsequent intermarriages, resulted in the genesis of a new indigenous peoples, the Maytee, with their own unique culture, traditions, language, way of life, collective consciousness, and nationhood. Indeed, the Maytee were trailblazers. They helped settle Canada's West by working the lands, establishing a homeland, and building Maytee economic activity during the fur trade of the Western Interior. Cuthbert Grant is remembered as one of the first leaders who helped to lead the charge for the rights of the Maytee Nation. At the Battle of Seven Oaks in 1816, it was a defining moment in time. In victory, the Infinity flag was raised in recognition of the dawning of a new nation of people. As time evolved, distinct Maytee communities developed along the routes of the fur trade and across the Northwest within what is known today as the Maytee Nation Homeland, which includes the three prairie provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, as well as parts of Ontario, British Columbia, the Northwest Territories, and the northern United States. Maytee were the first Indigenous people to form democratically elected governments and organizations, which helped to shape the early political history of a growing nation. It began with the first Maytee Provisional Government led by Louis Riel in Red River, 1869-70, which negotiated the admission of Manitoba into Confederation, and Riel's second Provisional Government in Saskatchewan, 1885. However, the defeat of the Maytee at the Battle of Batoche in 1885 resulted in the arrest and eventual hanging of leader Louis Riel for treason. This drove the Maytee movement underground, only to resurface during the Depression, with new Maytee associations on the prairies. Today, many of these historic Maytee communities continue to exist along rivers and lakes, where forts and posts were once hubs of fur trade activity from Ontario westward. As well, large numbers of Maytee citizens now live in major centers within the Maytee Nation homeland. However, even with these large urban settings, well-defined Maytee communities exist. The Statistics Canada 2011 census reported over 450,000 people self-identified as Maytee, resulting in the formation of the largest Indigenous nation in Canada, with nearly 90% located in the western provinces and Ontario. Since the death of Louis Riel, the Maytee have acted collectively to pursue his mission of self-government within the Canadian Federation. Despite their efforts, for years, Maytee have been treated as a political hot potato, in that neither the provinces nor the federal government wanted to take responsibility for dealing with them. During the Trudeau era, Harry Daniels emerged as the champion of Maytee nationalism.
What we are talking about is the equality of people here. And to use your phrase, we're talking about a just society. It can't be just for some Aboriginal people and not for others.
His efforts began to bear fruit when he succeeded with having Maytee recognized as one of the three Aboriginal peoples of Canada in the soon-to-be patriated Constitution in January 1981. At the same time, the Manitoba Maytee under John Morrisseau launched a land claims lawsuit against the federal government over its failure to provide land for the Maytee under the terms of the Manitoba Act of 1870. As time evolved, Harry Daniels' monumental achievement was soon called into question when the Maytee were denied representation at the first Constitutional Conference on Aboriginal Rights. Two leaders of the Saskatchewan Maytee, Jim Sinclair and Clément Chartier, emerged to lead a new national movement, the Maytee National Council. Founded on March 8, 1983, the MNC took Trudeau to court to secure seats for the Maytee at the constitutional table. Trudeau backed off, and the Maytee were seated.
I'm not here to justify why we're in the Constitution. That seems what everyone tries to ask us, to justify why we're there. We are there, we're an Aboriginal people. Now we will sit down and deal with the rights of Aboriginal people.
The MNC represented the Maytee at the Charlottetown Constitutional Talks, which resulted in the drafting and adoption in principle of the Maytee Nation Accord. Despite the breakthrough, the Charlottetown Accord, which included the Maytee Nation Accord, was defeated in a national referendum in 1992. It was a disappointing setback for the Maytee Nation. The MNC works with the federal government to further the Maytee agenda across the homeland. Examples include the signing of successive accords to offer employment and training to the Maytee Nation through the MNC's provincial affiliates or governing members, which include the Maytee Nation of Ontario, the Manitoba Maytee Federation, the Maytee Nation Saskatchewan, the Maytee Nation of Alberta, and the Maytee Nation, British Columbia. The definition of a Maytee person as adopted by the Maytee Nation is someone who self-identifies as Maytee, is distinct from other Indigenous peoples, is of historic Maytee Nation ancestry, and who is accepted by the Maytee Nation. In September 2003, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled unanimously that as Maytee people and members of a Maytee community, the Powelli's right to hunt was protected by Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution. 2013 marked the historic decision of the Supreme Court of Canada in Manitoba Maytee Federation versus Canada, in which the court ruled that the federal government had failed to implement the Manitoba land grant provision in the Manitoba Act 1870 in accordance with the honour of the Crown. The decision established a path forward to resolve the Métis' 146-year-old land claim under the Manitoba Act, in which the federal government at the time had promised to set aside 5,565 square kilometers of land for 7,000 children of the Red River Métis, a promise that was never fulfilled. On April 14, 2016, the debate over jurisdiction was finally put to rest when the Supreme Court of Canada in Daniels versus Canada affirmed that Canada has a constitutional and jurisdictional responsibility to deal with the Maytee Nation and its peoples, with roots stemming from the historic Maytee Nation homeland. On November 15, 2016, the Federal Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs and the President of the Manitoba Maytee Federation signed a framework agreement to begin the negotiation of land claims agreement to settle the historic claim of the Red River Métis that was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada. The Canada MMF Framework Agreement was just one example of the significant progress being made with the Liberal government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that is committed to advancing reconciliation with the Métis people and a nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship. His government entered into exploratory discussions with the MNC's governing members to establish a framework to address Métis rights protected by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 to support Métis self-government and resolve outstanding Métis claims against the Crown. These talks are expected to progress to framework agreements that will enable the Métis Nation to negotiate self-government and resolve historic claims. These talks will be supported by a long-awaited report called A Matter of National and Constitutional Import, released on July 21, 2016 by a ministerial special representative to the Federal Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. Lawyer Tom Isaac was asked to study Métis inherent rights under Section 35 and fulfilling the Government of Canada's commitments under the Manitoba Métis land claim. His report, which was well received by Métis governing bodies, called for a fundamental change in the way the federal and provincial governments deal with and respect Métis as Section 35 rights holders. In December 2016, at a meeting with the leadership of the Maytee Nation, the Assembly of First Nations, and the Inuit, the Prime Minister unveiled a new permanent bilateral mechanism his government would establish with each of the Indigenous peoples' national representative bodies. Through this mechanism, the Prime Minister has committed himself and his ministers to regular meetings with the Maytee Nation leadership to jointly set annual priorities, develop policies toward their implementation, and monitor progress. On April 13, 2017, Prime Minister Trudeau, Métis Nation President Chartier, and the presidents of the MNC governing members signed the Canada Métis Nation Accord during the first Métis Nation Crown Summit in Ottawa. The accord marks a significant step towards a renewed nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. It outlines the ways in which the Government of Canada and the Métis National Council and its governing members will work together to set priorities and develop policy in areas of shared interest. Under the Accord, priorities for the first year will be employment and training, education, early learning and childcare, housing, health, and new fiscal relations. This accord is the first step in a process that'll help to advance the interests and rights of the citizens of the Métis Nation. Finally, after decades of struggle, sweat and tears, and those who have paid the ultimate price, Métis are feeling that the winds of change are definitely blowing in their favor, and that it's time to move on. It's time to reflect upon the hopes and aspirations of ancestors who have worked the land and fought so hard for the greater good of the Métis Nation.